The following is a presentation of the Pro Wrestling Report. Informative, entertaining, and real since 1998. Welcome to PWR Ask The Booker, answering your questions about the inner workings of pro wrestling each week. And now, let's find out which question was selected for this week's episode of Ask The Booker.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report, Ask The Booker. Damian Nelson, along with the Booker man himself, David Hero, the man who books Great Lakes Championship Wrestling, known as one of the best independent wrestling organizations in the United States, and coming off the heels of Blizzard. By the way,
Blizzard Brawl.
Blizzard Brawl was a great event, aside from me being humiliated, and I still can't believe the elation that you show from airing that humiliating footage of me.
Did you, but it was good for business. Did you see all the views that got?
And then somehow or another, the full match got out there on PWRshow.com.
That was fantastic. That's called love.
I fired the webmaster.
Well, he deserved it. Didn't listen.
Clearly he didn't, because that match is out there. But this segment is all about you, and it's our weekly Q&A segment where you can send in a question to ATB at Ask the Booker, ATB at PWRshow.com, and we answer a question. And this week we selected a question from Jonathan Cordwell. Jonathan Cordwell comes from Manchester, England, and his question is this. Listen closely, David Hero,
yes,
so that you may provide the answer. Why aren't factions being used anymore? Back in the Attitude Era, you had the Corporation, the Ministry, DX, etc., where they had members who could pursue various championships. But these groups have disappeared. Why?
Well, it's simple. I mean, back then when you had DX and the Hart Foundation, the NWO, the LWO,
the Right to Censor,
the Job Squad, you had so much more talent.
The Oddities.
You had so much more talent. I mean, you had 2 or 3 times as many.
Spirit Squad?
Well, come on, really? Cheerleaders?
United States, or Dolph Ziggler came out of that.
Well, yes, he did. But the fact is that back then there was far more depth. There was more of a mid-card, established stars. You had guys like Al Snow, Val Venus. You had the Right to Censor. You had the Nation of Domination with Farouk and D'Lo Brown, and there was so much more talent. The problem with today is they haven't established all these kids, younger stars, lower to mid-card guys to make them believable.
There you go, okay.
They can't even fill a tag team division right now, and now they can't. And you want them to try to put together some factions.
Well, now, last week on Raw, the Usos in a tag team outing against Primo and.
And it was that
Primo or Carlito?
I couldn't tell them apart. They're all looking the same.
About the hair.
Well, they're brothers and cousins. They're all identical, but I mean, I would love to see some factions, and we kind of saw one with the Nexus, okay, which was a good start, but then they ran into the John Cena buzzsaw, which kind of killed them all off. They tried a faction with the Straight Edge Society with CM Punk and Luke Gallows and Serena and Joy Mercury.
Evolution in TNA, Immortal in TNA.
But the problem with
Evolution was WWE,
factions is that they're expensive. Well, you got 4 or 5 guys. They got to be traveling together. They got more stuff to do. Right now, wrestling is made of single stars. Okay? If you look at most of the tag teams that they've put together, it's always been 2 single stars, with the exception of the Carlitos and the Usos. That's about it.
If you look back in the history book, if you will, on factions, and you look back at the 4 Horsemen, which arguably is the greatest faction in professional wrestling history, you talk about traveling together. They were the Horsemen.
Yeah.
They
lived and breathed the gimmick.
Exactly. Those days are well beyond us. Well beyond us. And I think that when they have tried, I mean, look at what Evolution gave us. It gave us Batista. It gave us Randy Orton. Off the heels of Ric Flair and Triple H.
I think if you look at when factions fell by the wayside is with that last NWO run. When Nash got hurt, when Scott Hall fell off the wagon, X-Pac was into shenanigans. I guess it's hard to invest so much. It's easier to write one person off of TV than a whole group.
Yeah.
And maybe they're gun shy because of that. Maybe there's just too many different X Factors. That was another group also, the X Factors. You know?
What has come of this, though, and one thing that I've noticed and we've talked about is wrestling managers also sort of gone. Because you had J.J. Dillon with the Horsemen, you had Flair, which was sort of a manager role with Evolution. But Vicky Guerrero has sort of stepped into that role, managing both Ziggler and Swagger, and actually performing the role of a manager.
You know, the problem with Vicky, though, is she's become far more of a screamer than she has of a manager lately.
More of a screamer than a what?
A manager.
Oh, manager.
What do you think I said?
Well, I mean, you were moaning a little, so.
I wasn't screaming. But, I mean, Vicky does a great job of getting heat on herself. Not so much as far as getting heat, though, on the guys that she's with. It hasn't helped Jack Swagger a whole lot.
I think it has.
You think so?
I think it has.
But are the boos...
He was strong in that match last Friday on SmackDown.
I'm not saying how good of a wrestler he is. I'm saying his way to the ring. People are booing Vicky more than they're booing Jack Swagger. Jack Swagger...
But doesn't that rub off?
No, it depends. Certain managers are great at drawing heat just for themselves.
Without Vicky Guerrero at his side, where would Zack Ryder be now? Oh, I'm sorry, where would... still think about your star of the week. Where would Jack Swagger be now?
He'd be there. I don't know if he'd probably still be with Dolph Ziggler at some point.
Yeah. Well, a great question sent over from across the pond. Jonathan Cordwell over in Manchester, England. We want to thank you for sending that. And you can be the focal point of ATB, Ask the Booker. All you have to do is send an email to ATB at PWR Show.
It's as an Ask the Booker.
At PWR Show.
How much eggnog did you have last night?
At PWRshow.com. So get those sent over, and your question could be the next one asked right here on Ask the Booker. Again, that's ATB at PWRshow.com. For the Booker Man, this is Damian Nelson saying thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you Thursday night on Sudden Impact Radio.